Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
The first critical reactions to Starfleet Academy are finally here, and the countdown is on to the January 15th 2-episode premiere. For years, this show has been called a concept, a rumor, a ghost in the franchise machinery, but as the promotional trailers and posters have dropped, fans have called it everything from Starfleet 90210, Star Trek Hogwarts, the list goes on and on, while the studio has simply called it the future. Now, with the review embargo lifted on the first 6 episodes, we finally have a clear, detailed picture of what this show actually is. And quite frankly, the early buzz is, it's complicated. I'm Will, and welcome to Last Week in Star Trek, presented by Cena Nerd Presents Blur Trek. As of today, January 10, 2026, with 19 reviews in, the show is sitting at a respectable 84% on Rotten Tomatoes, with the critical rating. Of course, fans have not had a chance to weigh in yet, and so we don't know what the fan reaction is going to be until the episode premieres. I will say, while the early first reviews seem to be leaning cautiously optimistic, with some calling it a bold and risky reinvention, the thermal scans from fan forums and social media show a potential reactor core breach in progress. Today, we're going to do a full analysis of what we know about Starfleet Academy based on the initial wave of critical reactions, but also we're going to break down what got people excited and what's making them nervous. Next, I'm going to talk about the architect of it all, Alex Kurtzman, who's the showrunner. His contract with Paramount is up for renewal this year, and a vocal part of the fan base, that's the light at the end of the tunnel. But now new reports are coming out that, from his own words, that paint a very different picture of. And finally, I'm going to just do a couple quick hits on some other news across the quadrant, including a long-awaited update on Tawny Newsom's live-action comedy series, Kate Mulgrew getting real about a potential Janeway series, and a surprising gig for a late-night legend, and also 2 legacy actors in Star Trek. Let's engage. All right, let's get to the first reactions. Star Trek Starfleet Academy is scheduled to hit Paramount Plus with a 2-episode premiere, followed by a weekly release for its first 10-episode season. And the critics who have seen the first 6 episodes have weighed in, and initial reactions are calling it a wonderful A-flavored series that punches way above its weight class, according to the Slash Film. The general sense is that Star Trek is taking a big and a necessary risk. But let's address the trill in the room, or young adult flavor to it. Has some of the downsides, including some people fearing that it's going to dumb down Star Trek's intellectual roots for a CW style teen drama. And based on the first 6 episodes for folks who've seen it so far, the truth is they weren't entirely wrong about the format, but they may be wrong about the result. What's come out is that the show is aimed at younger audiences, and I've talked about here on the platform how Starfleet Trek does need to go younger, but it does fully embrace the campus drama format, complete with friendships, rivalries, and first loves. But according to the reviewers, it also does so without sacrificing the core tenets of Star Trek. Now, just to remind folks, this series is set in the 32nd century, which is when Star Trek Discovery finished its run, and it's about 120 years after the galaxy-wide catastrophe known as the Burn, which was the central mystery of Discovery's 3rd season. Now, the Federation is rebuilding after the Burn, and the Burn basically was the situation where there was this catastrophe that wiped out the ability for ships to travel at warp speed, and thankfully the Discovery, due to her special drive, was able to traverse the Alpha Quadrant galaxy because it wasn't impacted by the Burn. And so while the Federation is still rebuilding, the show is focusing on the first new class of cadets to enter the reopened Starfleet Academy in over a century. Now, the show operates on 2 different levels. One track follows the adult faculty led by Holly Hunter, who is Captain Nala, and she's dealing with the fragile state of the galaxy right now and the whole new mysterious threat that is threatening the new Federation. Now, the other part, the more central track, follows the cadets as they deal with the crushing academic pressures of being new cadets at the Academy, while also inheriting a broken universe that they've been asked to fix. And so that is where things really get interesting, because we know that Holly Hunter is an Academy Award-winning actress, and she is going to be a series lead, as well as the chancellor for the new Academy. We also know that Paul Giamatti has also been cast, and we've seen him as the potentially new villain. And Giamatti is a lifelong Star Trek fan, and he's called this role Dream with Wish Fulfillment, and describes the character as interesting, complicated, and problematic as the season goes on. And in some of the early reviews, there have been some discussion about how his character is super over the top. So we'll see here in a few days, as far as for us as fans who haven't had a chance to see the screeners, what that actually means. He says he's going to had a ball doing the role of Nisbraka, and he is playing a bad guy, quote, I suppose. That's a quote from Paul Giamatti. Now, for legacy characters, and we do have a few people returning, including Tig Notaro, who was on Star Trek Discovery. She played the engineer Jet Reno. Odette Fair is reprising his role from Star Trek Discovery as Admiral Vance, also from Star Trek Discovery. And then we also know that Robert Picardo is confirmed to be returning as the emergency medical hologram. The Doctor, as part of the teaching staff, is not a reprogrammed version of it. It is the original EMH from Star Trek Voyager. And of course, we also got some cool news that Stephen Colbert is going to be the voice of the campus's digital dean of students, and also understand Bill Nye may be also showing up in this series as well. So we have a lot of legacy characters, but also star power joining the series. So you have this fascinating mix of decorated cast of veterans and a core of young, new, raw talent. And everything I've heard about the three central characters, Caleb Mirror, JC, the Klingon character, and then also another sentient hologram, are the key three critical characters in the new show. So does it all work? Early reviews suggest that it does take a few episodes for the series to find its footing, but that once it really does start to soar, with many folks pointing to the 5th episode in the series as the standout that is both, quote, hilarious and canon rattling. So my takeaway from all of this is that Starfleet Academy seems to be exactly what Alex Kurtzman and his team has promised: a deliberate, unapologetic generational handoff. The other co-showrunner, Nora, she was the showrunner for the Nancy Drew series on CW. Apparently, it is designed to be an entry point for a new, younger audience, but using the familiar tropes of a campus drama to explore Star Trek themes. So it's not trying to be the Next Generation or Strange New Worlds. It's trying to be its own thing, and that identity will likely make it divisive, just like other Star Trek shows of recent note, like Discovery. It is a gamble, but according to critics who have seen it, it's a gamble that just might pay off. So before we get to the other news behind Starfleet Academy and its very interesting future, if you're liking this deep dive, do me a favor. Hit the like button, and also hit the subscribe button and ring that notification bell. I plan to cover all of Star Trek Starfleet Academy each week, so make sure you don't miss an episode of Cena Nerd Presents Last Week in Star Trek from Trek. So now let's move to the future of Alex Kurtzman, who for nearly a decade now, no name has been associated more with modern Star Trek, for better or for worse. Since 2017, he has been the chief architect of the Star Trek universe, and his overall production deal, which was renewed back in 2021, is set to run through 2026 this year. Now, with the recent merger of Paramount and Skydance, creating a new power structure, many fans have started to speculate, and in some cases, openly hoping that with the new leadership, they'll let his current contract run out. So the question on everyone's mind is Starfleet Academy Alex Kurtzman's last hurrah with the franchise? Well, this week we got a pretty clear answer, and the answer seems to be maybe no. During a press junket for Starfleet Academy, Kurtzman was asked about his future, and according to Cinema Blend, he was coy but optimistic, saying, quote, "Nothing I can share publicly, but I have reason to feel the future is bright," end quote. Now, This could be dismissed as just typical Hollywood producer speak, but the actions behind the scenes tell a more concrete story. And for one, we know that Starfleet Academy has already been renewed for a second season. And Kurtzman isn't just an executive producer on the show, but he's also the co-showrunner, and he's also directed some of the first season episodes. So you don't give that level of commitment and a pre-renewal of a show that hasn't even aired yet to a person you're planning to kick out. Second, he's not behaving like a person winding down his tenure. He's behaving like a man executing the next phase of a long-term plan. And he has been openly talking about how each generation needs its own version of Star Trek. We've seen that in the modern iterations that we've had here. For example, we had Star Trek Prodigy. Now we have Starfleet Academy. So basically, he's using Academy now as a test case for that philosophy of every generation needs its own Trek. Now, reports indicate that he has made his case to the new Paramount leadership, including Chris Parnell, who is one of the leading execs at the new merged studio. He hasn't met with Larry and David Ellison, who are the overall owners of the studio, but he met with Chris Parnell, who is working closely on rebooting and the Trek franchise, including some of the new projects that will take place in Star Trek. And he gave the enthusiastic yes as far as Kurtzman Starfleet Academy show when he saw the pilot episode. So the narrative of will Kurtzman contract be renewed seems to be shifting to like, what will Kurtzman's contract look like next? So those who have been vocally critical of his time in this era, the news will probably be a disappointment to you. But from a studio perspective, it doesn't seem that surprising to me, because as much as many in the fandom online don't like the creative choices that the franchise has taken over the last few years, he has, for better or worse, delivered a steady stream of Star Trek content. And it is a fixture of the Paramount Plus streaming platform. So in this modern era of streaming and the streaming wars, consistent delivery is king. So while everyone wondering if Kurtzman is coming to an end at the studio, all signs seem to be pointed in the direction that he's going to remain there. So be part of the Star Trek universe for some time to come. So let's move on to the rest of the news from this past week. And there's been some updates on some developments and some stories that people have been following. And I just wanted to hit a few real fast before wrapping up here. First, we did get an update from everyone wondering about the live action Star Trek comedy series from Lower Decks star and also Starfleet Academy writer who wrote the 5th episode of this first season, Tawny Newsome. She played Beckett Mariner and voiced Beckett Mariner on Lower Decks for folks who may not be familiar with her. But after a long period of silence, she did note at the Starfleet Academy premiere that the show that she and her co-creator Justin Simeon have finished writing a script for the Star Trek comedy series that was announced at, I believe, Comic-Con maybe a year or two ago, and they have turned that first draft of the script into the studio. And in an interview with Trek Movie, she said that, quote, everyone said, yep, we love it, and then we turned it in. So that project is now in the typical Hollywood churn of a waiting pattern of getting an official green light or not. And she does hope that the show will get its official green light. Just to remind folks, Newsom mentioned that the show is set in the 25th century in the same era of Star Trek Picard. So given it is set in the 25th century, there's definitely a chance that we may get some legacy characters from that time period showing up. And so while it's not a done deal, the live action show is a lot closer to being a reality. So that is that. Also, speaking of legacy actors, Kate Mulgrew, who of course played Captain Janeway in Star Trek Voyager and also played the hologram Janeway in Prodigy, as well as the animated version of Janeway in Star Trek Prodigy. She has been in discussions with a live action Janeway show very similar to like Captain Picard received. And this week she did give an update that this is not just a fan dream, but it is active and it's an ongoing conversation. They did provide a pitch to her. Whenever she was at the Starfleet Academy premiere this week, she did share that previous pitches that were put out there didn't quite work for her, but she is still open to pursuing something if the project does feel like it has to be, in her words, has to be something pretty great. So definitely seems the possibility of Kate Mulgrew returning in a live action version of Captain Janeway is still on the table. And then the last bit of news is that two of the Next Generation's most famous crewmates have a new project in the works. That's right, Brett Spiner and Jonathan Frakes are teaming up for a new podcast called Dropping Names. Now, this is not a Star Trek podcast where, like, we've seen the Decon Chamber with Connor Trenier and Dominic Keaton, and also in the Delta Flyers with Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wang. This is a show that is not a rewatch podcast, but it is inevitable. They said that they're going to be talking about, Star Trek will come up, but it's really the duo are just sharing their decades of being in Hollywood and sharing war stories and behind the scenes things that have happened along their careers. So this is great news for legacy fans if you're just fans of the actors Brett Spiner and Jonathan Frakes, and definitely get some of the behind the scenes things that they have seen in the Hollywood sphere. So there you have it. It's a big week for Star Trek news. Again, the first reactions to Starfleet Academy are in, and based on the first half of the season, it seems to be a well-crafted, if potentially divisive, new direction for the franchise. The architect of that new direction seems to be Alex Kurtzman, seems to be digging in and securing his future as the franchise's television shepherd for years to come. And there's a lot of things happening out there for the legacy actors, including Tawny Newsome and her potential comedy series for Star Trek. Kate Mulgrew may be coming back as Janeway, and Jonathan Frakes and Brett Spiner doing their own podcast. So it's very exciting. A lot of things coming in the 60th anniversary of Star Trek in 2026. So I want to hear from you now. What do you think of the early critical reactions around Starfleet Academy? Are you excited for a young adult flavored Star Trek, or are you skeptical? How do you feel about the news Alex Kurtzman is likely staying on? And what are the odds you'll subscribe to hear Riker and Data talk Hollywood stories? Let me know everything you're thinking in the comment section below. And if you're taking this deep dive with me here today on Last Week in Star Trek, and enjoyed this video and made it this far, again, please leave a like. It really helps the channel. Be sure to subscribe to our channel here on Senior Nerd. And until next time, live long and prosper.